Her laughter sliced through the hush of polished silverware and muted conversations like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. In an upscale diner where linen napkins sat perfectly folded and waiters glided like ghosts, a tiny girl with messy pigtails ran barefoot across the tiled floor, giggling as though the world belonged to her. Her father, seated in a wrinkled suit and holding a half-empty glass of water, watched her with a quiet smile, one that masked exhaustion. He had saved for weeks to bring her here, just to make her feel like a princess for one morning. No drama, just a memory. But then, without warning, she veered away from her table and sprinted toward a corner booth draped in wealth and silence. And as she reached a woman in diamonds and cream, she threw her arms wide and shouted one word that froze every heart in the room. Mom. Have you ever witnessed a moment that rewrote everything you believed in a single breath? David Miller sat at the edge of the linen-draped table, his hands rough from years of turning wrenches, now nervously folded around a half-folded paper napkin. In his early 30s, he wore a second-hand blazer that didn't quite fit and shoes that had seen too many winters. By day, he worked as a janitor in a downtown office building, and by night, he repaired engines in a dimly lit auto shop tucked between abandoned warehouses. But none of that weariness showed when he looked at Grace. His daughter, just 3 years old, sat across from him in a borrowed dress the color of soft cream, her pigtails bouncing as she played with the edge of a sugar packet. She was biracial, radiant with curiosity and joy, and blissfully unaware of the story behind her birth. To her, the world was simply full of magic, and her father was the tallest tree in the forest. The diner they sat in was far above their usual means. Crystal glasses, marble floors, chandeliers that hummed softly from above. It wasn't meant for people like David, but he'd saved for weeks to make this moment happen. Princess Brunch, he'd told Grace. Just once he wanted her to feel like she belonged in a place built for perfection. But across the room, the contrast was sharper than he realized. At a corner table surrounded by suited executives and white linen etiquette sat Olivia Westmore, 38, billionaire tech mogul and founder of Westmore Global. Draped in quiet elegance, she wore success like armor. Her hair a perfect sweep of gold, her dress sharp and untouched by the chaos of the world. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable, as if she were carved from marble herself. She was the kind of woman who built empires without blinking and buried emotions so deep they forgot how to surface. And yet, even Olivia wasn't immune to Grace's energy. The girl's laughter drifted through the air like a melody, and more than once Olivia's eyes found her across the room. At first, just a glance, then another. Something stirred beneath her practiced stillness. A flicker, a shadow of recognition she couldn't quite name. But she shook it off each time, until the moment Grace ran toward her and the room would never be the same. David had spent the last 3 paychecks skimming off enough tips to make this brunch possible. Not for himself, but for her. For Grace. He called it her Princess Day. And as they stepped into the elegant diner's glow, she gasped like she had walked into a storybook. The marble floors shimmered beneath her little shoes, and the glinting chandeliers above seemed to dance just for her. David guided her to the table like a knight escorting royalty, trying to ignore the stares from servers who questioned whether they belonged. He didn't care. Today wasn't about rules or image, it was about magic. Grace giggled as she stirred her orange juice with 2 straws and tore into the corner of her pancake with syrup-soaked hands. Her joy, loud and bright, spilled into a room built on hushes and whispered deals. Across the room, Olivia Westmore barely moved. Surrounded by powerful men in tailored suits, her table was a shrine to status. Flawless posture, hushed toasts, and cold efficiency. She barely sipped her mimosa, her eyes drifting between contracts and casual nods. But every so often, that laugh, that child's laugh, slipped into her consciousness like a note from a forgotten song. Her gaze would flick toward the sound, but her mind pulled it back. She had built walls too high to be breached by noise, or so she thought. Midway through David's careful effort to cut Grace's pancakes just right, she squirmed in her seat and pointed. "Daddy, I want to say hi." Before he could respond, she was gone, off the chair and darting across the room with the innocence of someone who had never been told she couldn't belong. Her white dress fluttered behind her like wings, and the entire diner turned to watch as she approached the pristine corner table. The conversation around Olivia died in a single heartbeat. And then came the word. Small, clear, and impossible. "Mom!" Olivia's world tilted. Her glass shook slightly in her hand, the liquid trembling just beneath the rim. She stared at the little girl now standing just inches from her, eyes wide and smiling like she had come home. Her board members froze mid-bite. One choked quietly on his toast. Whispers rose like steam around the room. David's chair screeched against the floor as he bolted upright, eyes wide with panic. "Grace!" he called, his voice breaking under the weight of alarm and apology. He reached them in seconds, swooping her up in his arms with an awkward laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said, avoiding Olivia's stare. "She's just confused. It's her first time here," she thought. But Olivia wasn't listening. Her eyes remained fixed on the child's face, on the smile that now slowly faded under her father's panicked tone. Her hand, still holding the glass, trembled slightly. Something in her chest cracked. Not visibly, but deeply. A soundless shattering she hadn't felt in years. "She called me," Olivia began, her voice distant, almost mechanical. David nodded, flustered, trying to back away. "It's nothing, really. She sometimes says stuff. She's imaginative." Olivia's gaze flicked to David now, locking eyes. And for a flickering second, there was something there. Recognition, confusion, pain. But she couldn't place it. Not yet. David held Grace close, rocking her gently, trying to calm her down. But the damage had already been done. Olivia's world, the one built on certainty, structure, and suppression, was no longer standing where she left it. And David, still apologizing, still trying to retreat from the spotlight, didn't know yet. He wasn't the one who had hidden the truth. He wasn't the one whose past had just walked back into the room. David had just stepped outside the diner, Grace bundled in his arms, when he heard the rapid click of heels behind him. The rain had begun to mist, soft and cool against the concrete, and he turned just as Olivia Westmore appeared beneath the awning, breathless, shaken, and no longer the untouchable woman who had ruled a boardroom minutes earlier. "Wait," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. David turned, cautious, shielding Grace slightly with his body. Her eyes darted to the child in his arms, still clinging to her father's jacket, thumb in mouth, eyes curious but sleepy. "Who is she?" Olivia demanded, her tone trembling somewhere between desperation and disbelief. "Why did she call me that?" David stiffened, unsure whether to explain or walk away. He had faced judgment before, but this wasn't judgment. It was confusion, hurt, maybe even fear. He sighed, grounding himself. Her name's Grace. She's 3, he began slowly, deliberately. I adopted her after her birth mother left. She was just a few hours old. No note, just a hospital file and a signature. That's all they gave me. Olivia's lips parted, then tightened. What was the mother's name? She asked. The question cut deeper than either of them expected. David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly through the notes he kept from the day he became a father. He showed her the name listed under Birth Mother, a name Olivia hadn't seen in years. But she didn't need long to recognize it. Her knees nearly gave. It was hers, her old name, the one she used in college, the one she had signed on a hospital form when she was just 21 and terrified, the name she buried when her family, reputation, and lawyers cornered her into silence. Her eyes flickered between David and Grace, the girl now softly humming against her father's shoulder. I signed those papers, she whispered, barely, audible. But I didn't want to. I was told it was the only way. No scandal, no career-ending mistake, just sign and forget. Her voice cracked and her hand pressed against her chest like something had broken loose inside. And now, she's here. She's right here, and she called me Mom before I even knew. David stepped back slightly, processing the truth as if it were unfolding in slow motion. You're telling me you're her birth mother? He asked, his voice low, protective, laced with something raw. Olivia nodded, tears beginning to form. I never thought I'd see her again, she said. I never thought she'd find me. David's arms tightened around Grace, his face unreadable. She didn't find you, he said gently. She didn't know. She just ran. And something in her heart knew where to go. There was a long pause. The kind of silence that fills every crack between people when the truth is too heavy to carry all at once. Olivia reached a hand out, but David took a step back, not in anger, but in instinct. You don't get to rewrite the past just because it found its way back, he said softly. She's my daughter. I held her through the night when no one else came. I taught her her first words. I watched her take her first step. I'm the one who stayed. Olivia's tears finally fell, streaking her flawless makeup and washing away every illusion of perfection she had maintained for years. Her hands trembled at her sides. Power couldn't fix this. Wealth couldn't replace the years. All that remained was truth, raw, aching, and irreversible. And in front of her stood a man with grease under his fingernails and love in his arms. A man who had given everything she hadn't. And a child who had no idea the moment she called out that one word, she had shattered 2 lives and begun stitching something new in its place. The elevator hummed as Olivia rose to the top floor of her penthouse, but inside her chest, everything was silent, eerily still. Her heels echoed softly against the marble as she entered her immaculate apartment, where every vase, every angle, every polished edge was curated to hide chaos. But tonight, nothing could stay buried. She moved to her walk-in closet, to the farthest corner, where a narrow wooden box had sat untouched for over 3 years. She opened it slowly, like peeling back skin she had long numbed. Inside were pieces of a life she had once carried and surrendered. A hospital ID band with her alias, a single photo of a baby wrapped in a pink blanket, and a folded letter, yellowing at the edges. She'd written it the night after delivery, when her hands trembled with love and shame. She'd never mailed it. Her father's lawyers made sure of that. She sat on the floor with the letter pressed against her knees, the city lights behind her window flickering like a storm she could no longer avoid. In her mind, the flashbacks came sharp and cruel. Her voice, younger, weaker, trembling as she begged her father not to make her do it. His cold response, "It's handled. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to forget this ever happened." The ink on the adoption papers had barely dried when they silenced her into success. So she threw herself into her empire, built tech that changed lives, funded causes for other women. Yet no amount of progress had filled the hollow she'd carved that night. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across town, David sat with Grace asleep, against his chest. Her baby bag had tipped over earlier, and while picking up her things, a crumpled envelope tumbled out. It wasn't addressed to him. He opened it anyway. The handwriting was fluid, unsure, emotional. It read, "To the person who will raise her, I don't know who you are, but I hope you're kind. I hope you hold her close when she cries and tell her she's brave when the world makes her feel small. I hope she dances in the rain and laughs without shame. I gave her away not because I didn't love her, but because I did, and I was told I couldn't protect her the way I wanted to. If she ever finds me, I promise I'll be ready to meet her. Love, Mom." David sat frozen, heart pounding, the letter shaking in his fingers. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sure what he felt, only that this truth had been hidden from him, tucked away by the woman who left them both. And now, without knowing it, the woman who wrote that letter had already been found. Grace had found her in the most honest way a child can, with one word spoken from the heart. The next morning, Olivia would knock on David's door, but this time she would be holding the past not as a shield, but as a key. The next morning, Olivia stood outside David's apartment building, far from the glass towers and gated estates she was used to. Her heels felt out of place on the cracked concrete, but she didn't turn back. Clutched in her hand was the letter David had read the night before, now worn at the edges but filled with something deeper than ink. A promise. When David opened the door, he didn't say anything at first. He simply stepped aside and let her in. The apartment was small, cluttered with toys and drawings on the fridge, but it radiated warmth, the kind that money couldn't manufacture. Olivia looked around and saw it all. The tiny kitchen, the second-hand sofa, the way Grace's blanket was folded with care. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of love. Grace peeked around the corner, eyes wide and curious. "Hi, Livy," she said cheerfully, running over and hugging Olivia's leg without hesitation. Olivia knelt, holding the child close like she was afraid to break her. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, blinking fast. Her arms trembled, but she held steady. Then she looked up at David. "I'm not here to take her," she said, her voice level but fragile. "I know I gave up my right to that a long time ago, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be in her life, as someone who earns it, a mentor, a guide, maybe, someday, something more." David studied her for a long moment. There was hesitation in his eyes, not from ego but from love, the kind that protects before it forgives. He nodded slowly. "You'd have to show up. Really show up. She's not a photo op. She's not something to patch a headline." Olivia's eyes glistened. "I'm not here for headlines," she said. "I'm here for her. And so it began. Grace started seeing Olivia once a week. At first, she called her Livy, a name she made up on her own, bright and innocent. They played in parks, visited libraries, and painted flower pots that Olivia kept on her penthouse windowsill. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't bring cameras. She just listened. And Grace talked about everything. Slowly, piece by piece, a bond grew between them, quiet, steady, unforced. David watched it all, sometimes from a distance, sometimes, beside them. And although a part of him would always be guarded, another part softened as he saw Olivia kneel to tie Grace's shoes or sit cross-legged on the living room rug to help her build a cardboard castle. He saw the change, not in her wealth or status, but in her spirit. She didn't try to erase the past. She tried to build something better on top of it. With time, Olivia used her resources to fund programs for single fathers, mechanics in training, and underprivileged children. But she kept her name off the plaques. No announcements, no interviews. It was the first time she gave something without needing anything back. One afternoon, Grace proudly presented them both with a crayon drawing. "It's my family," she declared. Olivia on one side, David on the other, holding her hands as a rainbow arched above them. Her smile beamed as she pointed to each figure. "That's Daddy, that's Mommy, that's me." Olivia blinked hard, biting her lip. David cleared his throat, suddenly quiet. In that moment, there was no need for legal titles or perfect stories. The caption, written in bright purple at the top, said it all. "My family." And for the first time in years, Olivia felt whole. Not because she had reclaimed what she lost, but because she had chosen to love what found her. Sometimes the people we lose don't stay gone. Sometimes they return in ways we never imagined, wrapped in innocence, carrying no blame, only the purest form of recognition. Sometimes forgiveness wears pigtails and calls you Mom in public, without understanding the weight that word once carried or how deeply it could heal. Olivia never thought she'd have a second chance at love, not the romantic kind, but the kind that makes you whole from the inside out. And David never expected that the woman who once disappeared from a child's life would return, not with excuses, but with the courage to make things right. Have you ever been caught off guard by a moment that turned your life around? A moment that didn't knock, just walked into your world and rewrote everything in one breath? If this story moved you, share it. Let someone out there know that even the quietest pain can find its voice again, and that second chances aren't always loud. They're often soft, unexpected, and life-changing. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time, where love arrives in the most unexpected ways.